of hemp makes 20 barrels of oil. No need for pesticides to poison all our soil. People got no food, they got no clothes, they got no rest. Right now, it's time for hemp.
Thank you for taking Time for Hemp. I am your host, Casper Leitch. You are listening to Time for Hemp all around the world on Tumblr, SoundCloud, iTunes, and iHeartRadio. And anywhere there is sound found on the internet, we are found around on the internet. Please share us with your friends. It is Friday. And on Friday, we salute the hardworking people who are working diligently to make the world a better place in their small town in America or Canada or Europe, wherever they happen to be. And my joint host today for Small Town Fridays is Chris Conrad. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning. You know, I came from a small town myself, 133 people. So I'm very much a small town guy, even though I've been living in the big city most of my life.
133 people. There's more people than that in my apartment building.
Yeah, I've had more than that people staying at my house before. So, yeah, I know. But anyway, yeah, that's out rural Maryland. So it's nice to do the outreach to the people in the small towns like Washington, D.C.
Oh, and in a town that small, you can't even belch in public without everybody knowing about it.
You got that.
And our joint guest today here on the Big Joint program is what we call our marijuana lobbyist, our cannabis lobbyist, our hemp lobbyist. I don't care. Everybody's got their own term. I don't call it marijuana. I call it hemp. I don't call it hemp. I call it cannabis. Well, I call it illegal. And we're going to be talking about making it legal with Howard Woolridge. Good morning, Howard.
Good morning, guys. Good to be with you.
Don't you get a little tired, Howard, of people telling you don't call it marijuana, don't call it cannabis, don't call it hemp, don't call it this, don't call it that?
I do. You know, I'm basically a lobbyist and advocate is nothing more than a salesman. And you do marketing. And I know from, my T-shirt that I invented, 17 years ago, that the term marijuana is no longer pejorative. It's no longer thought of as like, oh my God, you're trying to mess with Mexicans and whatever. Nobody knows or cares in the general public that marijuana 50 years ago or 100 years ago was a negative term for marijuana. And in fact, so for sales, it's much easier just to talk about marijuana because then 100% of the audience knows what you're talking about. And for cannabis, last I read a couple of years ago, 30% of young people did not know what cannabis was. They knew what marijuana was, but not cannabis. So I always use the word marijuana.
Well, what I've always found is like during the Proposition 215 campaign here in California, people said, "Oh, don't use the word pot because it's too pejorative," as you said. But it's like every newspaper story said pot. Medical pot shops, pot this, because it's so short. It's the shortest way you can say it. And when it comes to a headline, you want the shortest word. So no matter how much we said ourselves, don't say pot, which personally I like the word pot, so it doesn't matter to me. But a lot of people saying don't use that word. But the news media kind of drives what we call it.
Yeah, the PC police of the marijuana movement don't like it. But, they're not so much salesmen as PC police. And for the guys there's 6 of us, and by the way, 6 of us in Congress who work full time pulling the marijuana reform wagon. And I can't speak for all of them, but to be effective, you have to communicate clearly, simply, and that's what we do. And part of that is I use the word marijuana because everybody knows what that is. Every congressman, every legislative aide knows what marijuana is. Cannabis, some are not going to.
So now when you say 6 of you work in Washington, why don't you tell our listeners what group you're representing and how you ended up being a lobbyist as opposed to, say, riding a horse across the country?
Well, I represent Leitch, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, one of the co-founders. I've been here 10 years since I rode Misty from L.A. to New York City, Battery Park. And I work full-time on all drug issues with obviously a major focus on marijuana reform, marijuana legislation. And then you have, of course, MPP, you have DPA, and those are and then the National Cannabis Industrial Association, NCIA.
Right.
They have 2 full-time lobbyists, and those are the organizations which really pull the wagon in terms of full-time representation in the halls of Congress.
Right. And so I noticed you didn't mention Normal. They're more of a consumer organization than a lobbyist group at this point?
Correct. They do not place a full-time lobbyist in the halls of Congress.
So then,
going door to door, like I go door to door, and the others do too. And Normal doesn't have the manpower.
Yeah, and whereas somebody like me, I go like once a year for a lobbying day. You actually maintain yourself out there.
Right. This morning I'm in the Cannon building, the House office building. I did a total of 5 presentations to staffers to push the issue. I mean that's just real nickel and dime retail lobbying, and that's what I do.
So now we have a lot of stuff I want to talk to you about today, and I think a great place to start, though, would be with what's just happened in the House of Representatives about the Veterans Administration, and where do we go from there? We're going to get that in the Senate, too. So why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about what happened, what your role was, and what you think is going to happen next?
The cheerful news is that the House overwhelmingly, I think it was a 242-person vote, way more than we needed. Many Republicans voting our way. I think 60 Republicans voting our way to say that VA doctors can talk to VA patients. So our veterans are now going to be able to talk to their doctor about God's medicine and what it can do for them in place of the pills that have been given out for free, but of course often highly ineffective. And the Senate has already passed that type of legislation. Basically, states' rights for medical marijuana has been the law of the land now for 2 years based on appropriations. And so we're looking at ever more cheerful news as more Republicans turn libertarian 10th Amendment. My colleagues say I'm a little bit optimistic, but I believe with medium confidence that the new president will have on his or her desk a bill which will repeal the 1937 law we all hate.
Now, so when you went in this, where did this bill come from? Because I understood that there are 2 things. One is that I understood the Veterans Administration was already letting doctors talk to patients, and the other thing is that that this seems to be limited to states where marijuana is already legal under state law, or am I incorrect about that?
Mm-hmm. And my knowledge of that specific part of it is limited. This is not what I do for a living. Not just medical marijuana is a small portion of what I know about. I believe your statements were correct, but this is a huge beginning. So that as each state goes medical, like Pennsylvania recently did, I believe Ohio, the governor is about to sign a bill. Then that opens up, millions more being able to access it and have information about it. So yeah, we've all been in this thing I've been in this thing for 19 years. It's just one more step to our eventual goal.
But this is such a huge one, because I know here in California a lot of obviously there's a lot of very successful veterans and so forth, but we also have within the homeless population and so forth a big percentage of people who are veterans who are out on the streets. And one of the things is that what medical treatment they have is through the VA. So the idea of going to another marijuana specialist doctor and paying them to then get that approval when they don't even really have enough money to cover their life. Right. I think this is going to be a huge thing if they go to VA and get their approval that way.
Oh, so yeah, absolutely. My father was a Marine for 26 years. My 2 brothers served, and so this is an issue which is near to me. And I've had guys I went to high school with tell me about their PTSD from Vietnam and how God's medicine works way better than all the antipsychotics and antidepressants that the VA gives away for free. But like I said, so it is another big step, especially for the medical portion of this. And God bless all the guys who worked on it so hard. Guys like Don Murphy and Mike Collins and a few others.
Right. And so then, since we're talking about the national scene right now, you're saying that this is going through the House. I think you said that also had passed through the Senate, and that it's going to be, or do you say it hasn't not passed yet?
The last I read in the Senate a couple months ago, the Senate committee, and it passed the Senate, was that the DEA will receive no money again to enforce state legal medical marijuana operations. As you know, we're into our second fiscal year where the DEA has been cut off from funding, and that's been backed up by the federal courts. You cannot go after state legal operations. And so we're looking at into our 3rd year of no money for the DEA, which is just music to my ears, and I'm sure all your listeners.
Yeah, now I know we've got some people who've been like long-term advocates, like Dana Rohrabacher and our various legislators from Colorado and a few from Oregon and Washington. Is there some kind of like a cannabis or marijuana caucus sort of a group working there, or is it just kind of ad hoc as the bills come up?
You're making me laugh because when I first got here 10 years ago, I talked to an aide who said his boss was in favor of medical marijuana. And I responded, oh, so great. So he voted for it. This is when the MPP had their states' rights for medical marijuana back in 06, 07. He says, oh, no, he voted against it. I said, well, if he's in favor of it, why did he vote against it? Well, he didn't want to be seen with that crowd. What crowd is that? Well, the drug crowd. I said, but that's 170 United States congressmen. He says, yeah, but around here they're known as the drug crowd.
170. Well, that's not too bad. That's like almost half, right?
Yeah, it just points out that, this place is run more like a high school.
Yeah, that's better than the ratio among my friends, I think.
Yeah. This is a high school, guys. The petty jealousies, petty squabbles last for years, and you don't want to be seen, like with the jocks or the cheerleader club or whatever else in high school. You don't want to be seen with the drug crowd. So people actually have voted against medical marijuana because they didn't want to be thought of as a druggie. The drug crowd. It's like you just shake your head and go to work and just go. You got to play the hand you're dealt.
Yeah, it kind of sounds like that story about that Kitty, what's her name, in New York City, who was the woman who was killed and murdered, and all these people heard about it, but they all just thought, let somebody else deal with it. I don't want to be the person who deals with it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
easy.
Yeah, okay, good. And so now this, you were talking about, well, let me just say this. I've been going to D.C. for lobbying days since 1990 or 91, I forget. And I have to say that last year when I went, it was very different than any year I had ever been there. It was the most receptive. I think the phrase, it's a new era, almost every legislator or aide I talked to said it's a new era out here right now. That seemed like a really fast turnaround, doesn't it? I mean, because it seems like only like 4 or 5 years ago they were still, they would say, before you go in there, remember not to say that you smoke marijuana and not to say that you're for legalized marijuana. You're just for reform. You're just for medical. You're just for this. And now last year, like I said, it was like a different. It's like I had walked into a different Congress.
Well, indeed, and I'd love to take credit for it or my colleagues, but we all need to put in our history books or whatever. Ron Paul was the key factor, the dominant force in making that happen. When I first got here, the 10th Amendment was a dirty word, states' rights. And Ron Paul turned that around in 07, 08, 09, and with his going for president 4 years ago. And he really deserves the lion's share of the credit. Because now I walk into a Republican office, and almost all the staffers are little Ron Paul libertarians. And then they talk to their boss. And they're like yipping little 2-year-olds nipping at the heels of their boss saying, Daddy, you need to get on board with the 10th Amendment. And the only credit I can take is, after I've been here for 4 years, I said, guys, we need to focus on 10th Amendment as opposed to decrim or whatever else. And I got the six person team to sign on to the concept of go 10th Amendment for all marijuana and eventually get it because that's what we all wanted. And so that today we are very close to passing it in the House, and then the Senate will be, like, as they say, about 2 years behind. So that's why I believe medium confidence that the new president will have it on his or her desk, the repeal of the 37 law.
And so now the Carers Act, that is just about medical, right? So you've got a different bill that you're thinking of, or does this bill exist, or is this just something that you think is about to be written?
No. What I'm talking about is hypothetical. The Carers Act is already out there with, I think, about 14 Senate co-sponsors and a companion bill in the House. And again, I'm not a true lobbyist. I'm more of an advocate. Guys like Don Murphy, MPP, and DPA, they all actually go in and say, please support House Bill 1417, sort of thing. But I know that's essentially just medical plus reschedule to Schedule 3, I believe. But as you can see, I don't get into the specifics of those things because I stay on message, the lead message of eventually end all federal prohibition of all drugs. And then from there, the state should legalize, regulate all drugs. So that's more what I do when I go into an office.
So you're more about creating a climate for reform rather than lobbying a detail of a specific bill a lot of the time.
Exactly. When I first started doing this, one of the ladies from DPA says, "Oh, Howard, it's so much easier when you go ahead of me by a couple of weeks or a couple of months." I said, "Why is that?" Because, well, when I come in only asking for marijuana reform, they always ask, well, we had a cowboy in here that was asking to legalize all drugs. I mean, you're not for that. Oh, no, just marijuana. Oh, you're much more sensible and reasonable and rational. So I've been able to help also by saying, be the bad guy or the foil, if you will, by saying, when Don Murphy comes in, it's only, I just want to end the marijuana prohibition. Oh, that's not so bad. Okay, we can talk about that, but not this crazy stuff about legalized cocaine or heroin. So I do play a role, and they tell me it's helpful.
Yeah, well, you soften them up, in other words. But and also, I think that it is good to have somebody who's reaching farther, so that the person who's not reaching as far seems like an easier thing for the legislators to give it to them. Now, why don't you talk a little bit about your years as an officer and how you made the transition from police officer to advocate of reform?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I was a cop for 18 years, street cop, and then detective. And certainly I smoked a fair amount of marijuana myself as a student at Michigan State, and I knew that was just silly waste of my time to chase green plants and Willie and his friends. When I got to be a detective, I really changed my views on hard drugs as I saw the tremendous crime that was caused by the prohibition of the cocaine and everything else. And that was what was my major time spent every day was crimes associated with the prohibition of hard drugs. And so, and then I saw the futility of it and the cost of human and monetary, and that's when I changed my views. Of course, I did not speak out until I retired. And then I came out, a guy named Rick Day, who was the head of Texas Normal, helped recruit me into this thing, and I was impressed with him and his organization. And so I became with Texas Normal, and then Rick was able to hook me up with a guy that was, I shouldn't say hook up anymore. He connected me with somebody.
Yeah, you got to be careful. Those old terms we used to use are tricky nowadays.
Yeah. He connected me to a former Dallas Cowboy, as in a football player, and put me in Austin, Texas, for 5 months in 2003 to move marijuana law. And I went down there, and it was somewhat successful. And so when I went to Washington, D.C., that same Dallas Cowboy helped start my career here in D.C.
And so at what point did that turn into your Cops Say Legalize Marijuana T-shirts and going across the country and doing that kind of public outreach? And I guess our listeners want to know a little bit more about Misty the horse.
Sure. Well, once I got into this, I only have 2 speeds, on, off. So I wanted to talk about, I was talking to 1 or 2 rotaries a month, right, through in conjunction with my normal job, but I want to talk about it every day. And so I devised the T-shirt as a vehicle to talk about my issue every time I went to the grocery store. And so I tried, I came up with Cops Say Legalize Drugs, ask me why, and clean, simple, and then, of course, invite you to the conversation. But 9 out of 10 people walked away thinking I was a total nut job who wanted to legalize all drugs, cocaine and heroin and crack. So after 6 months of just saying this is not helping, I switched it to pot. Cops Say Legalize pot. Let's chase bad guys, not Willie Nelson. And that sold like hotcakes, on a cold winter's day. And so that was what the shirt was born. Now Leap went back, Cops Say Legalize all drugs, and right. God bless. But for me in Texas in 1998, selling pot was difficult enough. Selling pot policy. So you got to be careful. So that's why I kept it. In fact, I'm about to switch to drugs, as I said. and then the trip across America was I wanted to combine my adventure with my politics. So I got on a horse. I got on Misty in the Savannah, Georgia, with a T-shirt on. And 6 months later, basically, I'm in Newport, Oregon. And across the country, a couple million people saw me on TV and interviews and newspapers and such. So I realized it was a great way to get out the message in a way that was very much American, apple pie, cowboys. I mean, it was a match made in heaven. And the camera loved Misty, who was an extremely beautiful horse.
Well, who didn't love Misty?
Sorry?
I said, who didn't love Missy? I mean, she was so sweet.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and when I went out to California in 2010, a gentleman out there sponsored my trip because I'm not rich, but you know, when people give me a couple $1,000s, I'll make good use of it. But yeah, we were on TV 11 times across the state of California due to Misty being just so gorgeous, and you know, the sign saying, you know, I forget what it said for Prop 19, but you know, there's legalize, regulate cannabis, you know, Prop 19, and then the camera loved her, and so we got some good publicity. Same in Colorado in 2012. We went out to Colorado for 3 weeks for A64. We got on National Fox News as an example, and we were able to help push the issue. And I was very proud of what we did and what Misty and I were able to accomplish.
And of course, Proposition 19 is in many ways what launched most of the conversation and the spate of legalization initiatives, this most recent spate of initiatives across the country. Just wanted to mention to our listeners that if you come to the Oaksterdam Cannabis Museum, you will see one of the hats that Howard was wearing during his fateful trip across America. And how many hats did you go through on that trip, Howard?
On the first trip across America, I went through 3. And then on the way back across, that was 2003, and then the way back from LA to New York City, I think I wore out another 3. So, yeah, it's hard on the hats.
Okay, so then there's only like 6 of those hats out there. So for our listeners, if you go there, you'll see. And we use that actually, Howard, as a symbol of it's in our drug war exhibit where we talk about the drug war, and then your hat is a symbol of law enforcement officers who come around and change their position on that. Another thing I want to mention, though, about here in California is we have an initiative on the ballot, and it's quite interesting because there's a lot of people who are they claim to be advocates of legalization, but at the same time they're in favor of prohibition unless legalization is exactly what they want in the form that they want. And so I just wanted to mention a story here. In Oakland, California, there was a young woman. Her name was Cooper, Deshaw Cooper, 21 years old. Excuse me, I'm reading the wrong name here. Walker. Excuse me, the woman's name was Ashley Walker. Anyway, basically what it is she went out to buy some marijuana with some friends on New Year's Eve 2013, and she was shot to death by this guy, Deshaw Cooper, as she was out on the street trying to buy illicit marijuana. And there's a lot of people in California say, well, it's kind of okay like it is. But to a lot of people, you know, the idea that people are getting killed when they could have just gone to a store like they go to a liquor store, chances of getting shot are very small. But nonetheless, this woman in the illicit market, she's out in her car waiting for the guy to bring down the marijuana, ends up getting killed. In law enforcement, you guys really see those kind of situations occur, right? Where these drug deals gone bad situations that don't really have to be drug deals at all. And so maybe you could talk a little bit about the difference in the market between a regulated market. You've been to Colorado, I think probably to Amsterdam or whatever. Now in Washington, D.C., you don't, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. But about why it's so important to move this from under the counter to under the table to over the counter, the marijuana market.
Sure.
So why don't you talk about that?
Okay, well, that ain't rocket science. I mean, in Colorado, the violence has gone way down, of course, because almost all 70% of sales are now through a state-regulated store. Same as when you buy beer. Nobody gets shot or hurts, you know, buying the beer anymore because it's legal in all 50 states. When I see opposition to the AUMA, ALMA, I know from studies that, of course, one of the major opponents is the police and the police industry, the good prison guards. And secondly, of course, illegal growers do not want legalization, and they are fighting it tooth and nail. And then the third group, as far as I know, is that you've got some people who want a perfect bill right out of the book, and you know they're letting good be the enemy of perfect in their eyes, and so they're fighting ALMA tooth and nail for those reasons. But I'm convinced that the major opposition is coming from the police, prison industry, and the illegal growers. And it's all about money. I mean, when you look at the number of people hurt and killed because of prohibition, as you say, it should be a no-brainer. If it saves just one 13-year-old from getting shot dead in 2018, then my goodness, let's do it.
Right.
But you know, some people think money's more important than life.
Right. Well, and I have two acquaintances of mine who have disappeared while they're working for medical marijuana collectives, and they're part of what they do is they go and they try to find bulk purchases up in Northern California. Two of my friends have disappeared out in the woods of Northern California, and when I say disappeared, maybe they fled to Mexico, but maybe they're in a ditch somewhere, you know. And so the idea that people have that this unregulated market is such a safe and desirable place. I think it's they haven't seen the kind of things that you guys have seen on the side of law enforcement. And another interesting thing for me, Howard, is that working on with the adult use of marijuana initiative here is that I'm finding there's a fair number of active law enforcement, including prosecutors and police, who just say that they're just tired of it. They don't understand why they're wasting all this time on marijuana, and they're going to vote for the initiative. And so, of course, as soon as people hear that, they say, "Oh, see, cops like this initiative, therefore, they must think that it's going to create more crime, or it's going to give them more people to bust, or something like that." And I appreciate if you can maybe express it the opposite, that there really are police who see their job as being to save the community, not just to round up people and get a promotion.
Well, sure. LEAP has 7,000 cops basically who are members of LEAP, and we have 10 times that supporting our position that if you have a drug problem, see a doctor. And even Act now, the difference is most LEAP members are retired, but you're having now more and more cops, especially because of the heroin epidemic, coming on board saying, okay, it's time to just simply stop this drug war and stop arresting people for simple possession at a minimum. And this is all nonsense. We're wasting so much time on a green plant when ISIS is planning another attack in San Bernardino at the Christmas party. So this is permeating society, and it's definitely out there. We all know intellectually that when we ended the prohibition of alcohol, that the gangsters went way down in their violence and their power. And the same thing's happening here. The only thing that's going to slow that down is the fact when it's overtaxed, like in Colorado, you still have a robust illicit market. But as the lawmakers realize that they reduce the taxes, they eliminate the black market, then you'll see more and more progress being made to bring those taxes down into something where you destroy people making a living out of it, and giving kids jobs, etc. So there's just cheerful news everywhere. After 19 years of this, I am just thrilled beyond words, practically, about how much progress we're making almost every day.
Yeah, and so this is happening around the country. I think they're anticipating something like 6 different states will have initiatives, although it remains to be seen exactly what happens. But with California, there's definitely turned in the signatures and ready to go. Now, Washington, D.C. has gone through its own version of all this stuff, and you were involved in that. So why don't you talk about the city, how it relates to Congress, what the laws are, what its shortcomings are, and where you think it's going next?
Yeah, well, just very briefly, the D.C. initiative they passed here in 14 was roughly Colorado. Home grow, 2 ounces, 6 plants, and have some stores. Well, the Congress, in their own way, have been able to block some appropriations saying that, so you better not open the stores. So they left, but they couldn't stop the whole thing of home grow and the 2 ounces. So today you have what I call, they have 90% of what they want. They have everything but the store. So there's peace in D.C. In terms of the police. Now they can give a ticket to like 18 and 19-year-olds, but like minor in possession. But this whole thing has gone to almost a statistical zero. Like in Colorado, almost no police activity revolving around simple possession of marijuana. And so it's overwhelming success for everybody. And it's just a couple of congressmen here. Congressman Harris of Maryland, Republican, is the muffin head, the chief muffin head when it comes to congressmen, who is now, and he was featured in the Washington Post as being the champion for the illegal sellers in D.C. because since there's no stores, you still have to buy it, if you buy it, from an illegal dealer. So the illegal dealers love Congressman Harris, and the Washington Post made a big article out of it. And as I told you in the run-up, I said I've been to his office twice now to tell his aides that the marijuana dealers of D.C. thank him for his efforts to keep the stores closed.
Yeah, right. And so now this is a federal district. So how does that affect things like that? But it's still city law enforcement, right?
Right. Right now I'm in the House office building called Cannon. And in a sense, if I had a baggie of marijuana and stuck it out the window, it'd be legal. Inside the hall here, it's still federal, and they would bust the cops would bust me for it. But in terms of the city, I've talked to people, who live in the city, work in the city, and it's basically like Colorado now, where it's just no big deal. And nobody gets excited. People are mostly growing their own, from what I understand, and then they exchange it, or there's a remuneration. Yeah, I'll buy you dinner, a nice dinner if you got a quarter ounce or something. I mean, it's all being handled very informally, barter system, whatever. And it's just, and you read nothing in the papers. Washington, D.C., like Colorado and the others, is not on fire. And this is every day a testimony to the fact that you can legalize, regularize, if you will, marijuana, and nothing happens. And that's what the world is waking up to more and more Republicans are saying, you know what, it isn't that bad. All the horror stories of increased use, everybody crashes their car and doesn't show up for work, have not come true. So therefore, they're rethinking their position. Plus, as I say, the younger generation, even of Republicans, is heavily in favor of 10th Amendment states' rights.
And so now, are there venues in Washington where people can smoke the marijuana? You said they can't buy it, but if you go to a club or something, or are people smoking in the street? Where do people get to smoke? Or vape?
No,
or what?
They cannot go to a club. The city council has shot that down, thinking that would be something that would cause the federal government, DEA, to come in and cause trouble. So they put that on hold. This is my last information. Waiting for Congress to get the hell out of the way.
I see. And so then it's not really turning quite into the tourist mecca for marijuana that one like Colorado is by any means.
No, this would not be a mecca for that. Colorado and the other states that permit sales are still the mecca. And of course, as we know in Colorado, their unemployment rate is down to 3.5%, as marijuana is like the fastest growing industry in America, according to the folks over at NCIA, Michael Correa and his group.
And so now I understand that the last smoke out in Washington, D.C. was something of a surreal experience where historically the police have been harassing and arresting people at these marijuana smoke outs. Mm-hmm. But this year the police were just basically telling people to put it down or something like that, or not even that, from what I understand.
And I did not go to it for a reason. I didn't want to be anywhere near a 50-foot joint. And in my humble opinion, based on my experience, those type of demonstrations today are completely and totally counterproductive. They only generate negative news stories that makes our side look like a bunch of irresponsible brats. And when in fact we're mostly responsible, middle-aged, young, older, senior citizens who are responsible users, and that I believe in my opinion, it hurts the cause when you have these smokeouts now in public. Put on your coat and tie, put on a dress. Go to the halls of Congress and your state legislature and say, we need to treat marijuana like beer. And that's going to move the issue far faster.
And on the other side of that, you've got like Seattle Hemp Fest, where you've got this very carefully staged and orchestrated, thousands of volunteers working together, a regular event that was very important, I think, in educating the public. So it shows to me that there's a right way and a wrong way of doing things. Like here in California, we have events like the Emerald Cup, where you get city and county officials coming to the event, and it's at a county fairground, and all the licenses are in place. And then you've got these other events where they're, like you say, just kind of like people gathering and doing a quick smoke out. Then people complain about the smoke, and then it's over.
Right. And let me just say quickly on the global issue. I was in Vienna, Austria, for the international meeting on this that the United Nations has every year, and I had an official of that conference, the United Nations, tell me, you want to legalize marijuana around the world? The best way to do it? Pass legalization in California this year. That's just another reason that we need to get California in there next to Colorado, is because this is having an impact, guys, around the world. The world is taking notice of Colorado. It's not on fire, and California would be a big new signal that the United States is going this way. I just read today that Jamaica is about to open up stores and such. I mean, understanding that they want to be the Colorado of the Caribbean, and people are taking notice of the lack of problems and the increase in tourism and tax revenue. So that's why we need to put on our coats and ties and dresses to go talk to folks and move this issue. Not put on your worst and get out a 50-foot joint. That just does not do any good.
Yeah, and in fact, if you look what's going on with Canada now as well, you've got Uruguay, you've got Jamaica, and now Canada coming on board.
Right.
It's going to look pretty silly for California if we have Alaska, Canada, Washington, Oregon, and then Mexico with legal marijuana, and California saying, well, we're holding out for the perfect thing. You know, one of the things that really cracks me up about that argument, by the way, Howard, is that these guys who are saying that we don't have to compromise, we can get with a perfect initiative. It's like there were 17 initiatives. They couldn't even agree with each other about what the perfect initiative, but they think the whole state is going to suddenly unify. If we just vote no, that the state is going to unify. And of course, I'm encouraging our listeners right now that not to buy into that idea. That I very much agree with you that what happens in California is going to be an arbiter for the world. If the dope dealers and the cops are able to stop legalization in California, that's going to be a very bad sign for the rest of the world. If the voters of California move forward, that's going to be an indication that prohibition is on the verge of collapse.
Very much so, and that's why getting at least 3, if not 5 or 6 states to go Colorado this year is going to be crucial for what I do here in Congress and across the world to end this worldwide prohibition by being the lighthouse. Canada's strong signal that by this time next year they will have a set of laws in place to legalize, regulate, tax marijuana is another big step in this thing that will be, again, as we don't see problems, we'll see more nations rethink their policy, and especially when the United States, as I say, ends their prohibition, and I believe they will in the next 4 years. This will help just drive this whole thing, at least for marijuana, into the history books where it belongs.
You know, another spin-off of that whole thing is if you look at just what's happened in the past year alone, 12 months, we've had Trudeau, currently the prime minister. He was like in third place when he came out in favor of legalizing marijuana, and then over a period of 3 weeks, he pulled into second place, tied, and then won the election after doing that. Right now, we have Bernie Sanders campaigning around the United States, and he uses every opportunity possible to mention that he thinks marijuana should be legalized. In fact, my wife and I made a little bit of a mistake because when he first said it for the first time, we said, well, whenever he says that, we'll donate some money to his campaign. And normally, you expect him to say it 2 or 3 times during a campaign, but now he's saying it so often we can't keep up with him. We can't afford him. So it's an interesting situation, though. Here we are in California. We have actually a presidential candidate campaigning for the state initiative. He's gone around like 7 or 8 times already. He said he's in favor of voting for this initiative in California. This is pretty unprecedented, isn't it? And why don't you talk about the presidential politics right now?
Absolutely. And it's important to note that Hillary barely supports moving marijuana to a Schedule II. She has been a lover of the war on drugs, including marijuana, forever. She is not good on our issue whatsoever, and she will be only kicked and dragged and screaming to get medical marijuana and the only reason she does it is because of the votes. She doesn't believe in it. Gary Johnson, the new guy nominated this weekend for the Libertarian Party, is totally on board with 10th Amendment states' rights. He's also believes totally in every state should be like Colorado. He is the most consistent person out there for treating marijuana like beer. Trump has made noises about respecting Colorado, but he's certainly, of course, who knows what Trump thinks. But the bottom line is this year, on this issue, the people have a clear choice. Gary Johnson will be there for all 50 states, and he is an absolute supporter for many, many years, more than a decade, of treat marijuana like beer on the national scene. So when it's going to be between Gary Johnson, Hillary, and Trump, no question about it, the most dependable candidate is going to be Gary Johnson.
You know, and let's stay on this subject for a while, because I've been telling people that too. I know people say they can't support Hillary, they can't support Trump, they don't know what to do. I say, well, vote for Johnson. This guy's been around for a long time. He started as a Republican. In fact, he was a governor of New Mexico at the time when the Human Rights in the Drug War exhibit, my wife Mickey Norris and I put that on display there. And actually he said that he was influenced by these pictures and so forth of people in prison, and it helped him to come out on this issue. Now, it seems like he's also in a weird position, though, too. As a libertarian, he's talking about regulating it like wine or beer. Now, how does that work from a libertarian perspective? Because, most people think libertarians should, get rid of the government and let people do whatever they want. But now he's not talking about that. He's talking about age of consent and things like that, correct?
Well, yeah, and I can't speak for libertarians in total, but most of them support rational rules and regulations. And so an age of purchase, whatever it should be, 18 or 21, don't smoke and drive, like don't drink and drive. There's some libertarians usually believe in sensible rules and regulations, just not burdensome, overarching, prohibitions like Republicans believe in and conservatives. And certainly this whole idea of it should be like a tomato, even if you sell it. I'm a libertarian-leaning person, and no, if you're going to sell it, then there needs to be rules and regulations, packaging. I want to know what's in it, how much, etc. As a consumer, I want the best information of things I put my money down for. But if you want to grow it yourself, and consume it yourself, or give it away just to your friends, like we brew beer, then God bless, no regulations. And there aren't. I mean, it's like I just found this out. You can make your own vapor for e-cigarettes for nicotine. It's real simple, and there's no regulations. You can make all the vaporized stuff you want as long as you consume it yourself or give it to somebody else for a cigarette substitute.
Yeah, and of course, there's some proprietary thing about the way they make the little cartridges that people use and stuff, though, I'm sure.
Well, if it's for sale, that's a different issue, and that's
right.
And that's where I believe most of the libertarians I've talked to don't mind a few simple rules and regulations.
Well, this is where we seem to be seeing a little bit of a schism in the legalization market, community, and in California in particular, is that the people who are growers and sellers, they seem to think there should be no rules. But when I talk to the average consumer, they want to know there's no toxic pesticides in their cannabis. They would like to know what strain it really is rather than what the dealer just told them it was. They would like to know the ratios of the different terpenes and stuff so they can learn better about it than themselves. And a lot of people I know are really concerned about the dosage in the edibles. So you want to talk a little bit about that, or I don't know if that's a topic you have a particular interest in, but I just thought it seems like an interesting thing to get into is the way the edibles market from a few years ago, where it was just a girl at a Grateful Dead concert with a basket selling cookies to people eating 10 and 20 doses accidentally. It's been a big change.
Right, like Maureen Dow did. Well, no, and as a consumer, I want to know a lot about the product I'm going to put in my body, because things you put in your body can hurt or kill you. And I don't want to go into an overdose on marijuana. It's uncomfortable. So I want to know if it's organic or not. Did you use pesticides, herbicides? Is it a GMO? Or is it a natural plant that you've got there out there? So, I mean, as a consumer, I want that, and I just have to believe that most consumers do want that information so they can properly, because this is a psychoactive drug, guys. I mean, consumers are not going to want to just go hit or miss like they do when I was in college with what you bought off the street. When you had no idea what it was, where it came from, how much pesticide, you had no idea. Right. And fact, as a consumer, I want to know.
People had stuff that had PCP on it and things like that, and then they would
have
strong reaction to PCP, and they wouldn't even know it was there until they'd already smoked it.
Right. I want to be informed. I want make the best choice possible, and that means sensible rules, regulation, which include packaging. The 1906 Pure Food and Drug Act is why you see on the outside of a can of Coke what it was, and or your cake mix or whatever, or your can of corn. It's because the 1906 law said, the consumers deserve the right to know what's in there. And that's why I fully support it, and that's why it's been a good law for over 100 years, because consumers want to know what they're buying.
Mm-hmm. And so, the other thing that where people will say something like it's just a plant, it's like tomatoes and it should be regulated. I mean, I would say that I don't see people smoking tomatoes. They're not consuming tomatoes for a spiritual or for a medical or for a psychoactive effect. And so the whole idea that it should be treated exactly the same as tomatoes doesn't make sense to me. On the one level, I think it's quite a different plant. But on the other hand, like you said, even if you do decide that I'm going to grow tomatoes and give them to my neighbor, that's quite different from I'm going to grow tomatoes and put them out in the market. Who cares if there's salmonella in there? Who cares what's in there? We're just going to sell it.
Mm-hmm.
You can't do that with tomatoes either. So why would you be able to do it with marijuana?
Well, yeah, that's the problem. You have these leftover hippies and whoever else that, and in my opinion, based on my best information, that a lot of the people who say I want it being treated like a tomato are simply trying to delay the legalization for monetary reasons. They're making big money off it being unregulated black market, and they're going to be making a lot less money when it's legalized, because then you take out the risk factor of going to jail. And I mean, I've seen the reports that eventually, when you grow it outside at 10 acres at a clip, you can grow really good stuff for less than $1 a pound. Well, if you're right now making $3,000 a pound, selling it out of the Emerald Triangle up in California, of course you don't want the price to go from $3,000 to $1. And they fight the legalization simply for that money reason. And they say, well, we've got to treat it like a tomato because it's just a tomato. Well, tell that to any parent who's had their 14-year-olds come home higher than a kite, and they'll say, it ain't no goddamn tomato. It's a drug.
Even try to tell that to the dealers who are, or the sellers or whatever, who are, if it's just like a tomato, why aren't they selling tomatoes instead of cannabis? Well, it's obviously not like a tomato because you're not going to make, the kind of money that what you're talking about here. Let me take advantage of some of your vision and experience here when we talk looking ahead, because we only have a little time left here, Howard. And so right now the country's like a patchwork. We've got these CBD only states, cannabidiol, the non-psychoactive compound. We have full-on medical marijuana states. We have states that allow people to grow. We have states that don't. We have states that allow people to sell in stores. We have states that won't license stores. I think California might turn out, if we pass this initiative, it's going to be the first state to allow on-site consumption, like I think it's, I might be wrong about that, but I think we'll go. But in any case, how do you see this all coming together? Are we just going to be living in a patchwork country for the next 20 or 30 years, or do you think there's a moment where it's just going to all gel and people are going to come up with some kind of a uniform approach to cannabis around the country?
I see patchwork forever, because the system is designed, the thought is, and that's why I promote 10th Amendment. Remember, after 1933, and our grandparents ended federal prohibition of alcohol, there were many states that continued that prohibition at a state level. Mississippi didn't go wet until 1966, and God bless. And Mississippi may be smokeless in 2047, and that's fine. If you don't mind living in a state where marijuana is illegal, then don't live there. But if the people that live in Mississippi want an environment where marijuana is not legal, then in my world, it's perfectly okay for them to say this is going to be a non-marijuana state. So I expect to have local rules like that all over the place as long as I'm alive and everybody else. Because if you travel and know about alcohol, there are counties in Kentucky. There are counties in Texas where beer is illegal. You can't buy it, okay? Because the state gave the power down to the city and county level, and that's fine. Texas knows how to run Texas. They are not really equipped to tell Connecticut what to do, and I say, vive la différence.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that we hear people saying about the initiative here in California is that it allows for local governments to regulate the commerce. They can't ban personal use. They can't ban sharing. They can't ban transportation. They can't ban giving it away. They can't ban homegrowns, but they can ban businesses. And some of these people who are saying that that the initiative should have addressed that. But I don't know how it is in other states, but here in California, the state constitution says that local governments can control their local commerce. And so, in order to do what these people are talking about, we would have had to make it a constitutional amendment and get 66% of the vote and things like that. And so, in a way, I mean, it seems to me like another thing where they just create this impossible standard just to make sure that they can keep legalization from moving forward by saying they want something that we're just simply not going to get. I mean, look at Florida. They got 57% yes vote for legalization for medical use, and they still lost because they needed 60% of this constitutional amendment.
Right. Yeah. In politics, that's known as a poison pill. You take a good bill and put some poison in it so nobody votes for it. And that's what I see happening, like in Florida, like you said, and that's what people are trying to, would like to do with OMA, saying it's a terrible bill because of A, B, C reasons. Folks, it ain't perfect, but no bill comes out of any legislature perfect on day one. That's why you adjust it and you adjust it and you adjust it. But you start out with the great goodness, which is to eliminate kids selling it and kids buying it from somebody off the street corners where they get hurt and killed.
Yeah, right. And like I say, if we had passed Proposition 19 in 2010, like we had tried to, then Ashley Walker would be alive right now. She would not have been sitting outside of a hotel, it's an apartment building, looking for marijuana and getting shot. She would have been going to a store, picked some up, and gone home, and that would have been it.
Right. Or in what happens now in Colorado and everywhere else is if you're 16, making a bad choice to buy marijuana at 16 and consume it, you go to your older brother or your older sister. that they go to the legal store. So you don't have the problem of the sales coming from somebody you don't know with a product you have no idea where it came from. So again, it's an improvement. It's better. It's not perfect, but it is much, much better.
And since you mentioned the minors, I think another thing that I think is really important about Alma, and maybe you know about how it relates to other states, but the initiative here is going to be that if you're under 18, there's no more jail, there's no more prison, there's no more felonies or misdemeanors. It becomes an infraction, and when you turn 18, your record is cleared. And so this is the kind of thing where I think what you're talking about, young people make bad decisions, and whether marijuana is a bad decision or not might be a personal opinion, but regardless of marijuana, young people make bad decisions. And so I think one of the important things for society is to protect them from the long-term consequences of a what do you call it? Youthful indiscretion should not be a lifetime consequence. Yeah.
Right. And I see across the country in the coming years, don't try to do it all at once, but I see in the coming years more states taking a look at this through the Judiciary Committee and saying, you know what, if you have a record for simple possession of marijuana, where there's no guns involved, no violence, and no whatever, then that record can be expunged by turning in a postcard and asking for it to be expunged. Because millions of people are hurt today because of that record they've had for 10, 20 years, trying to get a job, a loan, a credit card, whatever. And I see that as happening in the next 10 and 20 years. But it all starts with what? Little Colorado.
Right. And so now, speaking of what you were just talking about, it reminds me of a young guy who smoked a lot of pot and became president. His name is Barack Obama. I don't know.
Doom Gang, yeah.
Yeah, right. So then, so what do you think about how's history going to look at his term in office? I know he still has a few months left. I think he said he's not going to do anything else, although I'm hoping there's a last-minute surprise where he maybe reschedules marijuana. We don't have to wait for Bernie Sanders. What do you think? Number one, do you expect him to do anything else? And number two, what do you think history is going to say about him as president on this issue?
On this issue, the history book should give him a C minus, because he knows intimately how this is not an issue, not a problem, and he has done nothing actively to fix it. He's allowed Colorado and Washington, et cetera, to go forward, but he's never lifted a finger to stop the carnage of kids getting hurt and killed selling it, and that's shameful and immoral. He never used the bully pulpit to say, folks, we need to let this be a 10th Amendment issue and move this thing forward. He never forced the issue of moving marijuana from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3. He has not really lifted a finger. And I'll tell you now, we learned this after he was elected. We were told at a meeting that do not expect any 0.0 efforts out of the White House in the first 4 years. And then in the next 4 years, we've still seen 0.0 active, making it better, and that's shameful. He knows better than any president that marijuana is much, much less dangerous than 3-2 beer, and he's done nothing actively, and shame on him.
Yeah, and well, I don't know where I would put him. I think I may put him a little higher than you, because I think that he's created this climate. He's certainly changed some of the discussion by talking about how it's not more dangerous than alcohol and we should not be destroying people's lives. But then, like you say, as far as what he's done, he's issued a few memos, most of these recently the Cole one, which is good. But the other thing is that, he says things like it's up to Congress to change this. And you and I both know that the Congress has authorized the president to change this at a moment's notice. He doesn't even need permission. He doesn't even need 5 minutes. He could just make a phone call. Okay, take marijuana out of Schedule 1.
That's correct. I mean, he controls the head of the DEA, and you can simply do what Nixon did on something else, which is say to the DEA, I want you to reschedule marijuana, follow the science, and reschedule marijuana to 3. And if the head of the DEA says no, then you're fired. Hire a next guy and say, will you reschedule to 3? Yes or no? No, I won't. You were not hired. The third person, fourth person say, yes, Mr. President, I'll take the job of head of the DEA, and on my first day in office, I will reschedule to 3. He never did that. He's never taken active steps to move it down to 3.
It's almost funny. It's kind of like he makes it a point of pride that he doesn't let politics affect his appointees. So he appoints all these people who are totally no good instead of picking out people who are going to adopt his policies. I mean, when you saw the Ogden memo come out in 2009, and then within a year we had massive crackdowns in Montana. They wiped out the medical. The Ogden memo, for our listeners, was the first time the administration said it was going to respect state medical marijuana laws in 2009. But so anyway, within a year we had every medical marijuana facility in Montana had been shut down, a full bench press on Michigan going, California, raids all over the states, and law enforcement flying over doing aerial surveillance of all our medical marijuana collectives that they could find in Northern California. The head of the DEA coming to California threatening state officials if we legalized marijuana, they were going to go after them and stuff. And so then a few years later, when Colorado is on the ballot, and Obama's running for president again, and he needs those votes, suddenly it shifted to another direction altogether, and they were quiet, completely silent about the initiative there.
Right, and that's despite the fact the NAACP came on board with 864 and actually also the Prop 19 earlier because of the racism. You know, the racism is off the charts. I worked with racist cops, and that's another unbelievably good reason to end the prohibition because of the racial harm done to people of color. And despite him being the first African-American president, again, he did not help anybody in his ethnic community at all by taking a proactive stand and doing something about this horrifically racist policy that just drives me crazy.
Yeah, and overall, you know, I mean, I think Obama's a nice enough guy, but I think that the three things that people see is that there was not very good progress on racism under his presidency. There has not been the kind of progress we should have gotten for the drug war, and we haven't seen him going after the banks, for the bankers. No one has gone to prison for what they did to destroy the economy when he came into office, and those three failures, I think, are going to haunt him. But in any case, we're running a little low on time here, Howard, so why don't you talk about whatever you think is important for our listeners to know that we may have missed, and also how do people reach you and Leap, and how do we facilitate their support for you?
Yeah, well, you can go to the leap.cc, Charlie, that's the Leap website. Look under speakers, and I'm listed there if you want to get a hold of me. And any questions, concerns, I've got one-page sheets on, you know, whether it's DUI, marijuana, gateway theories, what's going on in Switzerland with heroin-assisted treatment. You know, I've got all kinds of information. Be happy to share that. And but yeah, biggest thing is write your congressman, write your two senators every 6 months, same email saying, "Dear Senator, please apply the 10th Amendment, states' rights, to marijuana policy. Sincerely, a voter." And that would help me and the other 5 guys who pull the wagon immensely. Mail is around to the left, sir. Yeah, to the left.
So you mean Congress still likes to hear from his constituents by letter or by telephone or wherever means necessary?
It's all email. Do not send an old-fashioned letter. 15 years ago, that was perfect. But now they have to go through they got to make sure that the envelope doesn't have any explosives in it or poison or whatever else. So just send an email.
Yeah, I figured
same one, and just say, that's it.
All righty. And so then, let's see, Howard Woolridge, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, that's leap.us?
No, .cc, Charlie.
CC, Charlie. Okay, I don't know exactly what that stands for, so I'll just go with your CC there. And so, okay. Let's see, and then to get that literature that you said, is it stuff they can download from online, you said, from the website?
There's some, but you have to, there's a lot of stuff that's not online, and just ask me personally, and I'll be happy to give it to you. Like I say, if it's a question of DUI, marijuana, I've got a whole sheet on that. I give it to Congress every day. All
right, sounds good. And so then I don't know where my co-host is, right? My joint host.
I'm right here, and I want to thank you
Casper,
for this
fantastic.
fantastic.
Any other closeout words you got here for us today?
I do. I have really enjoyed this conversation. It has been a lot of fun, and I have learned a lot. I do want to remind people that we are a team here at the Global Broadcasting Network who are dedicated to ending prohibition. Make it a point to come to the timeforhemp.com website and check out all of our programs. And if you find a host or a program that you enjoy, they have lots of past shows you can download for free and share with your friends. We're also growing marijuana live on our website. Lots of editorial cartoons to enjoy.
Hey, when are you going to get smell added to that, by the way, Casper? People have been asking me.
What?
When are you going to get the smell-o-vision added to your...
As soon as Microsoft gets it done and incorporates it into Windows 10, that's when we'll be doing that. And Howard, I want to thank you so much for being our joint guest. And remember, the next time you hear me, you'll know that it's time for hemp.
Look at all that money, yeah, the money that they spent. Take another look and spend some time.